And here we go. All right, guys, we are standing at the end of our mat. Feet are right underneath the hips, about hip or shoulder width apart. Wider the stance, the easier it is to balance. We're going to stretch our spine nice and long towards the ceiling. Feel that weight at the ankle between the heel and the ball of the foot, pressing straight down into the floor. Slight little tuck of the tailbone as you zip up, draw up through the pelvic floor, up the front of the abdominals. And arms are going to reach straight out in front as we sink the shoulders down, chin to chest. We forward fold. We draw the abdominals in. We find that hollowing, and we curl and roll. Rolling towards the floor, keeping that weight at the ankle. We reach and stretch, letting ourselves hang for a breath. Feel the whole back of the legs stretch and open, as well as up and around along the spine. Keeping the shoulders drawing down the back, the shoulder blades. Feeling the neck stretch long as the collarbone spreads wide. And on the exhale, we're going to draw the abdominals up and in, pressing up away from the floor. Scooping and curling, feeling that articulation up the spine as we curl and restack, reaching the arms forward and fold and curl at the midribs once again. Engaging the glutes as we tuck the tail and begin to create that C-curve through the low back. We're rounding and rolling down towards the floor, reaching the shoulder blades back and down, feeling that weight at the ankle, stretching the neck nice and long. And exhale to tuck. Working on that restack of the spine piece by piece. Restacking all the way up. And arms reach up nice and long overhead. Fingers will interlace, reaching the index fingers up towards the ceiling, stretching longer and taller. We reach up and hinge over to the right without kicking the hips out to the side. Feeling that stretch up along the left side of the torso. Coming back to center. Lengthening up, we stretch up and over. To the other side, reaching nice and long. Coming back to center, arms separate up overhead, and we curl and articulate down. Finding that articulation as we roll down, that weight at the ankles. Reaching longer towards the floor. Things should have opened up a little bit more. You should be able to get a little bit lower. Feel a little bit more stretched out. One more breath as we hang here. And exhale. Curling and restacking, exaggerating that draw of the abdominals up and in, pressing the front of the hips forward as we engage to the back of the leg and the hip. Arms reach straight up overhead. We're going back into those side bends. Fingers interlace. We stretch up, longer, taller, lengthening towards the ceiling. We inhale, up and over to the right. Anchoring that left foot, that left hip towards the floor. Coming back up to center. Stretch up, farther and taller. And up and over to the left. Anchoring the right foot, pressing the right hip down towards the floor. And back to center. Arms separate. Curling and rolling forward once again. We work that articulation. Keeping the weight at the center of the foot. Right in front of the ankle, we hang. Letting the head hang towards the floor, shoulders slide down and back. Drawing the abdominals in, keeping that midline nice and tight, that stretch of the spine as we lift through the pelvic floor, drawing up and in with the abdominals. And we're going to walk our hands forward, nice and slow. Walking out to a pyramid position so we can find that flat palm position, reaching the hips back, trying to drive the heels down, sliding the shoulders down, reaching the tailbone long for the ceiling. Similar to that downward dog pose as we reach back to stretch further into the legs. Try to create a little arch in the back, reaching the tailbone up versus tucking the hips under. One more breath. And we'll round the spine. Curling forward and walking the hands out one or two more steps so we can come out to that center plank. Pushing up away from the floor, engaging the glutes, trying not to let the belly hang. We're holding strong here. Pushing up away from the floor, feeling that tension in the legs as we draw through inner thighs. Knitting the ribs in, knitting the abdominals up and in. One more breath. And hips reach back. Feeling that arch of the back, pressing the heels down. And we'll slowly walk the hands back towards the feet, trying not to sway the hips from side to side. We'll hang here, feeling that weight again at the center of the foot, and we'll walk our hands around into the outside of the right foot, feeling that rotation and that stretch deepen up the back of the right leg, breathing into that stretch, trying to relax. And hands walk around, over to the left. Finding that rotation through the body, anchoring into that left heel to stretch the calf further. We come back to center. Feeling that weight at the center of the foot. We'll bend the knees slightly forward. Draw the shoulders down, and we scoop and tuck, curling and restacking. Pressing up, straightening the legs as we straighten and restack the spine. Standing up nice and tall, arms come up overhead, fingers interlace, we flip to go palms up towards the ceiling. Engaging glutes and abdominals, the chest lifts up. Sliding the shoulders back and down. One more breath. And slow to come to center. Arms come down by the side. We're going to step forward with the left foot to create a lunge stance, a nice split stance position. Getting as vertical as you can with that left shin. Even knees slightly forward over the ankle. If you need a wall or a chair to balance, grab a prop. Right heel is anchored towards the floor. And I want to try to square that back leg off to make sure the heel's not tucked in too much towards the center line. Pressing that back heel down, and now driving the hips forward. Increasing that stretch up the back of the right leg. And we breathe. Focus on that breath. Ground into that front left foot. Feel the left quad activate and stabilize you further. And heel lifts up on the right foot. And we're going to drop that back leg, bending the right knee, we lower straight down towards the mat, sliding the spine down the wall, and press back up. Hands can be on your hips, reaching to the front, or sliding down a wall. Find a prop if you need more help for balance. Nice and slow. Trying not to hinge forward with the torso. We're sliding up and down. Last two. Finding that focal point to help with the balance. Both legs straighten. Right heel is still lifted. Arms reach forward, and we're going to fold and dive over that front left leg. Reaching down towards the floor, fingertips connect to your mat. Try to drop that right heel now. We're in our split stance. Stretching the back of both legs, trying to pull that right hip around to the front to deepen the stretch and square the hips off more. One more breath. And we'll bend that front left leg. Hands are still at the mat. And dropping the hips down towards the mat to stretch the front of the right hip. Sliding the shoulders back and down. On our next breath, we're going to step our left foot back. In line with that right foot, we're back to our center plank. Pressing up and away from the floor, nice and strong. Holding here. Straight and long through the spine, good tension in the legs and the core. One more breath. And we kick the hips up and back to stretch. Finding that flat back, that slight arch in the spine and the low back as you reach the tailbone up. And then we'll walk our hands back. Nice and slow, back to the feet. Hang for a breath, let the head drop, the neck stretch. Bending the knees, tucking the tailbone, rounding the back, we restack. Nice and long, nice and tall, stretching up towards the ceiling, changing sides. We step forward with that right foot, finding that vertical shin on the right leg. The left heel is pressing down into the mat. Feeling that stretch up the back of the left calf. Trying to square off that back heel as much as you can. One more breath. And we pick the left heel up. So we can work that lunge. Bending the back left knee, we lower towards the mat. Sliding the spine down that imaginary wall. We're going straight down and pressing back up. Straightening that back leg and bending the knee to lower towards the mat. Finding that nice long spine. Stretch long through the torso. Ribs and abdominals knit in. We're zipping and drawing up from pubic bone all the way up to the mid-ribs, to the bra line, just below the pecs. Last two. And we straighten the legs. Arms reach forward. And we fold and hinge at the hip, diving forward over that front right leg. reaching the hands, the fingertips towards the mat, and then dropping that left heel down for that split stance stretch. Squaring off the hips as much as you can. Feel as if you're wrapping that left hip around and forward to stay squared off, increasing that stretch. And then we'll bend that right knee. Working more of the lunge stretch, pressing the hips forward and down to open and release that left quad and hip. One more breath. And then right foot steps back. Back to that plank position. Upper back is flat and strong. We're pushing up and away from the floor. The ribs and the abdominals are knitted in. Stretching the legs longer and straighter. We're going to bend the elbows lower to the mat. Coming to the knees, keeping the knees on the mat, we're going to curl up. Chest lifts, pressing up, and returning to that plank. These eccentric push-ups with the assist to come back up. We bend at the elbows, slow to lower. Knees connect to your mat. We peel up. Coming back to that plank position, and elbows bend, slow to lower, along the side of the torso. Knees down. Shoulders pull back and down, chest lifts. We're on that kneeling plank, and then we pop up to straighten the legs. Last two. Ribs and abdominals knit in. We straighten the legs, find that strong plank position, and elbows bend. Chest lifts. Coming to that kneeling plank position. We'll straighten the legs, pop the knees up, and kick the hips back for that downward dog stretch. Right knee bends forward as we press the left heel down more. And switch. Switch. Keeping the neck long, the collarbone spread wide. Bending the left knee one more time. We'll straighten the legs, curl and round the back, coming forward back out to that plank, and we'll lower to the floor. Legs are nice and straight, reaching out behind you. Arms stretch towards the knees and the ankles, allowing the neck long, arms reaching long down the side of the body, and we inhale to lift the head, neck, and chest. Exhale to lower, floating the nose, the face up off the mat, and inhale to lift. And exhale to lower. Working your basic back extension, feeling that fold along the mid-ribs. Fingers interlace behind the back to open the chest further as we lift. Drawing the abdominals up and in, protecting the low back. One more. under the forehead. Resetting the spine, reaching nice and long. We'll separate the legs slightly at the mat. And we'll stretch the legs nice and long. Shoulders slide back and down. And on our inhale, we're going to lift the legs up. In for that hip extension and slow to lower. Pressing the front of the hips down against the mat. Feeling that even tension across the front of the hips from pubic bone to the top hip bones on the crest. Keep reaching and lengthening the legs long, stretching them out of the hip as they lift. Last two. We'll curl the toes under, hands come by the chest, and we peel up and sit back to stretch. In for that rest position, dropping the chest down either onto the thighs or between the knees. We reach out long overhead. On the next exhale, we'll restack, rounding the spine, curling up. We're going to pick the hips up off the heels, coming up to that tall kneeling position, pressing the hips forward as we straighten the spine nice and long. Arms reach up overhead. Fingers interlace, reaching up farther and taller, longer for the ceiling. And we reach up and over to the right. And back to center. Lengthen up and over to the left. And back to center. Arms drop forward at about chest height. Engaging through the glutes and the abdominals, we inhale to fall back towards the heels, stretching through the front of the hips, pulling into the abdominals more, and exhale to rise. Finding that nice, tall, long position, we hinge at the knee to fall back. One more. And arms reach up once again. Fingers interlace, stretching up long towards the ceiling. We hinge to the right. And up and over to the left. Arms come down by your side. And we'll come down to a supine position on our mat. Working into our bridges. Laying flat on the mat, finding that neutral spine, that little gap between the low back and the mat. We reach our arms down towards our heels, which are aligned with the sit bones in the center of each side of the hip. On the exhale, we're going to engage the glutes, press into the heels, lift the hips straight up, sending the knees forward towards the toes. Drawing the abdominals in and weighting the bottom half of the shoulder blade. Pausing for a breath or two, maybe even 3 at the top. We hinge at the hip, reaching our pockets, our sacrum, straight back down for the mat. We're creating that movement at the ankle, knee, hip, and across the mid-back through the thoracic. As we lift the hips, we anchor to the bottom half of the shoulder blade. We don't want to arch the upper back. As we send the knees forward towards the toes. And we hinge at the hip to lower. Finding that nice pivot at the hips. Reaching our arms up towards the ceiling, palms are turned in so we can really press our shoulder blades down flat against the mat. And exhale, hips lift, sending the knees forward as we draw the abdominals deep towards the spine. And we hinge and lower. Pressing through the heels, finding that strong bridge as we draw the rib cage down when the hips lift. Finding that movement at the ankle to send the knees forward. Last one. One more deep breath. And hinging at the hip, lowering the sacrum back to the mat. Arms come nice and long down by your side. We're going to float the right foot just up off the mat as we knit in tight, cinching up that corset through our center line. We inhale to reach and straighten that right leg forward out nice and long across the mat. And exhale to bend the knee, draw the heel back towards the hip. Inhale to reach, lengthening and straightening the leg further and longer as we tighten up deeper into the core. Drawing that heel back towards the hip. Feeling all four corners of your torso evenly weighted against your mat. Both sides of your hips, both shoulder blades planted, firmly connected from side to side against the floor. Placing that right heel back down to the mat. Take a moment to readjust. And we'll float the left foot just up off the mat, and we inhale to lengthen and straighten that left leg out across the mat, pressing it out long, and bending the knee, drawing the heel back towards the hip. Inhale to reach, pushing the legs straighter and longer as you draw the abdominals in deeper. Last two. Resting the foot flat to the mat. Let's take a moment to work a little bit of our pelvic tilt to decompress the low back. On the exhale, the hips tilt back, drawing the pubic bone, the tailbone up towards the ceiling, creating that hollowing and that C curve through the abdominals and the low back. Feeling the weight of the lumbar spine down against the floor as you use the abdominals to draw in deeper, creating that stretch and length and gap between each vertebra. Articulating back to a neutral spine. And next exhale, we tilt back. Rocking the hips back. Collarbone spreads wide, neck stays long. And rolling along the spine back to neutral towards the tailbone. Exhale, tilt. One more. Working into our figure 4 stretch, we'll cross our right ankle over our left thigh and bring our left leg up to tabletop. Reaching through, grabbing the back of that left thigh, keeping the little gap at the small of the back. Right knee moves away from the shoulder, rotating out to create that stretch deep in the hip. One more breath. And we'll switch sides. Right foot down, left ankle crosses over that right knee. Creating that arch at the small of the back. We pick the right leg up to tabletop, grab the back of the right thigh, and the left knee is twisting out and away from the shoulder. One more breath. And slow to unwind. Knees are bent, feet are flat, right in line with the sit bones. We're going to reach the arms up overhead, drawing the ribs in so the upper back does not arch. And on the exhale, arms flow forward. We fold at the mid-ribs to lift the head, neck, and chest for our hundreds modified prep. And inhale, slow to reset. Anchor the tailbone, the bottom half of the sacrum. Reaching overhead as you drop and pull the ribs in. And exhale to fold and lift. On our next one, we'll hold and lift, keeping that height of the chest, that little gap at the small of the back, that nice, flat, neutral spine. We inhale, arms go up overhead, keep the chest lifted. And arms flow back down by the side of the hip and thigh. Inhale, arms glide up, they reach. One more. And we'll slowly reset the shoulders, neck, and head back to the mat. We look out over that right shoulder, dropping the right ear down towards the mat, stretching along the left side of the shoulder and neck. And rotate back over to the other side, head and neck twist to the left. Reach that right arm, right shoulder down to increase the stretch along the neck and the top of the shoulder. And we come back to center. Knees come to tabletop position, drawing the abdominals in, feeling the weight of the hips and the shoulder blades against your mat. And we inhale to reach the right leg out, forward, long and strong. And exhale to glide back. Inhale, alternate to the left. Left leg reaches forward, long and strong as you draw the abdominals deep to the back, keeping that little gap at the small of the back throughout the movement as we alternate from side to side. Drawing in deeper through the core, reaching straighter and longer with the legs, creating that tension up the thigh. One more each side. And we'll draw the knees in towards the chest, let the back round and stretch. And feet return to the mat in line with the sit bones. Fingers interlace. Hands come to the back of the head to support the head and neck. And on the exhale, we fold the midribs to lift the chest. Pause for a breath at the top, hold here, and we exhale to rotate to the right. Inhale through to center and exhale, rotate left. Coming back to center, we pause for a breath. And exhale, reset back to the mat. Taking a breath on that inhale, we exhale, fold and lift at the mid-ribs, pausing for that breath. And exhale, twist right. Inhale through to center and exhale, twist left through the mid-ribs. Keeping the weight in the hips. Curling and resetting back to the mat. Exhale, fold, drawing the abdominals in to draw the chest, the neck, and the head up. And it's an exhale to twist. Finding that rotation to each side. Pausing at the center before you reset back to the mat, nice and slow with control. Finding that movement along the mid-ribs below the pecs. One more set. Arms come down long by the side of the body. We'll bring our knees to tabletop. Drawing in tight through the inner thigh, we'll inhale to lengthen and straighten the legs forward and up. And exhale to reset back towards tabletop. Inhale to press and straighten the legs further and longer as we draw the ribs and the abdominals in. And exhale back. Without the chest up, we're reaching up slightly more towards the ceiling to keep the stress off the low back and the torque out of the hip. One more. Holding at tabletop, we'll reach for the back of the thighs. Fold and lift the head, neck, and chest. Add a little bit of momentum as you tuck into a ball, and then curl and roll up. We'll balance on the sacrum. Draw the shoulders down as we float the legs to tabletop. Hinging back slightly to open the space between the chest and the thighs. And arms pull off the back of the legs and reach for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Resting the feet back to the mat. Turning onto our right side. Keeping the legs together, the heels and ankles lined up back towards your sit bones, your tailbone. Working into our side plank. Either on the hand and wrist or on the forearm. Posting nice and strong, reaching that left arm up towards the ceiling. On the exhale, the hips lift up and forward, finding that nice strong side plank. Reaching up towards the ceiling, engaging the glutes as you squeeze through inner thighs. Rolling that right shoulder down and back. Pulling in nice and tight for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hinging at the hip, dropping the hips back to the mat, lowering the arm down. We're going to swivel and spin to the other side. Stacking the legs, feet and ankles back in line with the sit bones and the tailbone. Left hand is out, reaching long, either on that hand and wrist or on the forearm. Pushing up and away, we reach the right arm up, and when you're ready, we exhale. Hips lift up and they press forward and through. Pushing up away from the floor, opening through the front of the body, squeezing through glutes and inner thighs. Feeling that tension run all the way up the spine, all the way through your torso and through the legs. One more breath. And slowly lowering the hips back down to the mat. We'll flip over, face down one last time. Arms reach out to a T position, drawing legs together and palms and arms are floating off the mat as well as the face. And we inhale to lift. In for that back extension with arms reaching out to the T, and exhale to lower. Inhale to lift. And slow to lower. Legs are straight and long. Good tension through the legs. Through the inner thighs are reaching long out of the hips as you lift the chest up off the mat. Folding at the base of the shoulder blades, through the mid-ribs, keeping it out of the low back. And 3, 2, and 1. Hands bend in, they fold in by the side of the chest. We curl the toes under, curling up, peeling up off the mat. We sit back for our rest and stretch position. One more breath, and then exhale to restack. Coming up to that tall kneeling position as we articulate the spine, restacking nice and tall, nice and long, pressing the hips forward, fully opening the front of the hips as we stretch the spine long towards the ceiling. One more nice deep breath, and rest. All right, guys, great work today.